this is an important gathering, and I think it's an important gathering because it speaks to all the externalities of transit development aside from just getting it built. And I want to perhaps speak to a few very important characteristics of that I've learned in my experience and what I'm working on today and in the future. That is, CIM is our development and investment program is now placing over $7 billion. We invest in urban districts now in larger scale because of the diversity of product, the diversity of age of buildings, the fact that it is not a monoculture. And it happens, that's a broad direction of our investment and development programs across the country and in LA. But one of the interesting things is with following that path, it happens to be that you end up with probably 95% of our assets are within either directly adjacent, on top of, or within walking distance of a major transit line or station. And these things come together. They create strong, healthy cities, healthy economies, economies where there's a growth engine underneath them. We wouldn't invest where there isn't growth opportunity. It's a very important message to job creation, to the ongoing reinvestment that always needs to be happening both on the public and private side. With the extension of the rail, there is a tremendous investment on the public side in this entire district. And it is a long-term investment, and it will be transformative. It will be disruptive. It will have short-term impacts. Some of those short-term impacts can be turned into successes using the various tools and funds that the MTA will bring to this. But in the long term, what it will represent is on the part of every agency of the city an investment in this area that cannot stop with the completion of the rail. There will be a recognition that it is a long-term investment, proper focus on the public realm in this city, and with the kind of growth that we're going to have, we will have a better city. And then speaking of what it will take to make this a better city, I also want to speak to a concern I'm very involved in now called the California Infill Builders Federation. And we are recently formed a group of builders that have with the intent to have the capacity to influence legislation to get real barriers to urban development removed. You have to all know that urban development, with all of the SB 375s, with all of the incentives, with all of the is more difficult, more costly, higher risk than other forms of development. And until and we as developers, as people who are understanding this, are not looking for incentives. We're looking for a form of deconstruction, deregulation of planning as we know it in this, and I'm a planner. We've created a system that is so impossible to move that good ideas live and die during the cycle of planning, and that becomes a prerequisite to getting something built. And planning, so we are working on how can we take the broad assumption that was established by Governor Brown in his first administration, the state land use plan, that identified urban development and limitation on development where there's natural resources and agricultural production as the state's growth. And how can we return to that and look at all of the individual pieces of legislation that now, on their own, support good resource management, stormwater runoff. I don't want to go to all the lists. What do we do with that? We ignore it and start all over in cities. And with every project, we reinvent an analysis of the microscopic cumulative impacts of development. There are lots of adverse impacts of development. The state has long concluded, but never enforced, that urban development, taken as a whole, even at higher density with more congestion and more intersections that are not functioning well, will result in lower vehicle miles traveled, less greenhouse gas, a better use of tax base, greater value, land value per square foot from a tax, from a fiscal perspective, and as compared to growth patterns, which Neil did a good job of describing. And yet, our CEQA process, our land use planning process, effectively makes the development of a quarter of a block across from a transit station about as difficult as doing 1,000 acres in Newhall.
There's not 1,000 acres left in Newhall.
Okay, to Home Pass.
Yeah, very good. Okay.
So this is a vision that we have as an infill builders federation. We're gaining a lot of support from other builders and beginning to get the ear of legislators. And there is, in fact, despite the dysfunction of what's going on, there is, in fact, because of budgets, because of the inability to fund these kind of dinosaur procedures, and because of the sense that we need to free the economy so that we can create jobs, there is a coming together of interests and an interest in pushing through some major game-changing legislation. And whether it happens or not, I think we should all be very open-minded about that. There are many people and strong lobbies who have very good arguments for public health, who have very good arguments for economic justice, who have very good arguments for affordable housing, who have very good arguments for environmental protection at a micro level and at a cumulative level, all of whom have highly protected places at the table. We are trying to bring all these groups together with builders and come to legislators on both sides of the aisle and say, now is time to say where we want to build and where we don't want to build. And the transit corridors of Los Angeles are the only places where Los Angeles can grow without disrupting neighborhoods, without and to accommodate growth. It's not either or, but it ought to be a lot more. And so with that, I'll just, those are my remarks that I could sort of throw out for discussion.
Thanks very much.